I'm a girl on fire, I'm not a victim. A girl on fire, I'll stand my ground. Girl on fire, I've made a choice, I stand proud. I'm a girl on fire. I'm a mother, a daughter, a sister, a friend. I'm every woman. I have taken up arms and I choose to defend all that.
Lynette Oxley here for Tac Shack Tactical TV and Ghosts and Girls on Fire 16 Days for Action. I'm here with Merlize Jogiat, or MJ for short. Thank you very much for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you?
Well, first and foremost, I am a mom of four. Currently trying to get back into active parenting, but I am a coach. I teach on narcissistic abuse, how to avoid abuses. I do speaking, work with NGOs, but for the most part I am loud, crazy, love to talk, love music, and just trying to enjoy life.
That's fantastic. So tell us what brought you, your journey from childhood abuse and then later it followed you into your married life. What happened?
Well, you know, when you're young, you don't know that it's abuse because you're brought up in a situation that's normalized. So from a very young age, I didn't have a close relationship with my dad. He lived in the house, but I didn't know why we couldn't connect. And I would actually go out of my way to sit and watch army movies with him, sitting alongside him because it was the only way we were going to connect. But then from around the age of 6, I have ADHD, so I was very hyperactive as a child. From around the age of 6, he became physically abusive. And that continued till I was, I think, at least 17. Obviously, it escalated when I was older. I got a big mouth, so I don't think that helped me. But also, I've always been very aligned to activism because I never understood why our parents were not the type of people we could speak to. I always felt like I had to protect my little sister and I had to protect myself because no matter what happened, no one else was coming to my rescue. It didn't matter whether it was family, whether it was the church. I was always turned away, and the things that were happening at home was always shielded. And the thing that always confused me was the difference between my dad's behavior in the house and outside in front of other people. So that's basically how it started, and it made me very averse to lies and manipulation. But obviously, I didn't avoid that as well as I hoped I would have. And when I was 19, I met a youth leader and assumed, okay,
He's from the church, am I correct?
Exactly. Okay. And fell straight into a hole. But obviously didn't know what to look out for. The funny thing is, in hindsight, literally in the first 2-3 weeks, there were things that should have alerted me to the fact that something was wrong. But I was already so attached. I was not attracted to him, but I was so attached to him that I was just like, I can't stop thinking about this person, and I never ever understood why. One thing led to the next. We ended up having a son, and for me, the next thing I thought was, okay, since we have a child, we might as well get married.
Yeah.
So
society.
Yeah, exactly. And I come from a Christian home. You know, it was really a bad thing that I'd fallen pregnant. And to a degree, I was trying to assimilate to the system because I really stand out. Having ADHD, being talkative, really loving to speak to people about their experiences made me stand out of people who just wanted to conform. So at some degree, this was my conformation. I didn't know how else to seem worthy of those people's attention, right? And early on, there were already issues. I think we were married a month, and I moved out.
Wow, what was the signs?
Well, there was a lot of neglect, like extreme neglect, to the point where I was so distraught over the fact that I couldn't have a reasonable conversation without some sort of altercation. And I moved out that first month because of a physical altercation that ended up happening simply because I was trying to have a reasonable conversation, which we're supposed to do. But then it taught me to navigate a little bit more carefully around him just to protect myself. But at no point did I recognize how much devaluation was happening in the process. And over the years, it just escalated. There were things that were happening. Things like I'd find messages on his phone that was spun around. I later found out apparently in those times I was being, he was telling people that I was hitting him, right? Most of the time I was walking on eggshells, all of the time. Like I knew if the house was not squeaky clean, and I unfortunately taught my children the same thing, that there was going to be problems when he got home. There was no emotional intimacy whatsoever. And literally, like Dr. Ramani would say, you feel like you're dying on the vine. I felt like that so long.
Who is Dr. Rami? Because I don't know.
Okay. Dr. Ramani is a psychologist in the US. She teaches about narcissism.
Okay.
So it's through her that I actually figured out what happened to me. Because throughout the years, you're so confused. I'm just like, why are you not coming around?
The bad becomes the norm.
Yes.
And you can't get out of it.
And there are good times, but the good times only last long enough to pull you back in, right? Then it escalates again and you just keep giving them grace. So in that process, around the age of 24, because he kept saying I'm the problem and something's wrong with me, I went to counseling. And the counselor said to me, you do know you still have adult ADHD, but all the things that you're talking about don't make sense. So what I decided to do was to start doing my own healing. Thought, okay, maybe the issue is because my dad was abusive towards me, maybe I need to heal from that, and then I'll get better. It would make the relationship better. Very naive, but I'm glad I did it, because it helped me heal through what happened with my dad. And over time, I started to recognize it didn't matter how much better I got, things seemed to get worse. And the more I found my grounding and myself, the worse everything would become.
Because you empowered yourself.
Exactly.
And it's not something that a person that would like to control you.
Exactly.
Take.
But the thing about it is, that scared me, I think, for a while, was you can even be doing that and still be so naive to the things that are happening behind your back. And it will take you years to see it. That's why it's so important for me to recognize the red flags first. Because if I don't see what's wrong, I'm not going to pay attention to things happening behind my back. The thing I think that bothered me the most, that ended up, I had postpartum depression twice. The second time I was hospitalized for it. They wanted to put me on antidepressants. I've had depression numerous times. In my last pregnancy, I had depression from the beginning. And it all stemmed from him hinting to the fact that we can't have another child, and he would prefer if I'd had an abortion. And the chaos that came from that, there was constant chaos, like nothing just ever was clear-cut and to the point.
So was the pregnancies planned?
The second one was my daughter. The boys were just coming as they wanted to come.
Okay.
And obviously it was told that it was my fault because I'm not managing it properly. But I'm not going to lie, I don't think my life would be as good as it is now without my kids. So there's that. But yeah, there was a lot of that going on. And the physical stuff is so difficult to talk about, because it's one thing if someone stands in front of you and smacks you with an open hand. It's another thing when they poke you enough for you to get so frustrated. So when you end up on the floor, it's your fault because you're frustrated. That happened so many times that I eventually just thought, okay, maybe I just need to sit down and be quiet when he's pressing me, because maybe what he's saying is more important than how I feel. So it was very difficult to even say I am being abused, because I had no idea what emotional abuse was. I had no idea how much financial abuse I was actually going through until I had to ask permission to buy underwear. That was wild.
But you were young. 19 is young. So you didn't work at that stage?
No, so I had a job. I was working as an administrator in the bank, and the funny thing is, it didn't matter how much I tried to do. If I was at work too long, I had to do something for work, I was being accused of cheating. Like anything outside of serving all of his emotional and physical needs was me doing something otherworldly. That went on for many years until I resigned my job in 2016, because we got into the media space. And I was like, okay, the best way to do this is I resign my job, take my entire pension fund and fund the business. Don't do that. It was the worst mistake I ever made. Because what had happened right after, I got, it was maybe 3 days before I got my pension, we were cleaned out. We were robbed entirely. But the way the robbery happened should have alerted me to the fact that something was wrong.
It was him, wasn't it?
Girl.
Yes, I could see it
Girl.
coming.
Because now all the money that I got went straight into buying new stuff. Because only the gear was stolen and my cupboard was ransacked because there's 5,000 rand cash in there. That was my mother's money. And our car was stolen. And I found out about like fraudulent events that were continually happening that shocked me when this was coming to an end. But long story short, when I resigned my job, we started this business. I threw myself into learning everything I could about business. So by the time 2020 rolled around, we were making really good money. I was traveling a lot, even in COVID, there were clients that owed us hundreds of thousands of rands. So I'm like, since I've been struggling with you all these years to emotionally connect, you can't go anywhere in COVID. You are stuck with me. So now maybe we can refresh this relationship. And that's when I started to see something was wrong, because he found everything else to focus on except me. So I was painting and baking banana bread like everyone else.
Yeah.
But then in December that year, when everything started opening up again, I went to go and do a shoot in Cape Town. Had a conversation with a friend, and then the light bulb went on. I'd been doing it by this stage for 13 years, and nothing had changed. I was with the same person I had married. And that was concerning to me because I was remarkably different. And then I texted him and I said, I don't think this is working. Things are not getting better. That was
Dear John text.
yeah, and it backfired really harshly because obviously he started to realize I was noticing something was wrong. Came back from Cape Town. It was big fights because we won funding. I won Female Entrepreneur of the Year in 2020 and another European award, so we won funding. Then there was a big fight about money, because money is a huge issue, right?
It always is, yeah.
We always need to be buying BMWs. I have no idea why. We have 4 children to feed. Why are we buying nice cars? I never understood that. But then when this funding was coming through, now it is a big fight. You wanted to control what needed to happen to that money. And then eventually February rolls around and I watch Red Table Talk on Facebook with Dr. Ramani, and she speaks about narcissism. Now I've heard this word swirl around before, and when my parents got divorced, my mom told me about it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people just throwing this word.
Yeah, they have no idea.
Yeah.
No idea what it means. So my mom had told me about the word before because she figured out my dad was one when she eventually divorced him. So I thought, let me go and check for myself. I went down a rabbit hole for like 3 days. I watched 3 videos where she spoke about a neglectful narcissist, and for the first time in my life, it felt like someone lived in my shoes and watched my entire life and finally could make sense of what I could never make sense of. And knowing me, I went on a study binge for months. I went crazy. But it also taught me how to avoid him altogether. Long story short, those first few months, he could tell that I was different and I was not tolerating it anymore. He moved into the office and escalated. Then eventually, he was physically abusing my son at that point already, from around 2019. School had called us in because he had bruises in his face, all these things were happening. He moved into the office, and then it's actually 3 years to the day on Saturday. Then he moved out after hitting my son. And I recorded the whole thing because I was so sane from seeing what he was doing. And he took all of the business's stuff and left. The following day I found out I had COVID. So now I was in lockdown with my kids for 2 weeks and being harassed repeatedly. The amount of phone calls I was getting on the house phone and my phone, I didn't know if I was going crazy because I was dumb enough to only follow Dr. Ramani's messages until he leaves. I didn't realize how much more dangerous it gets after the fact.
And obviously his family supported him.
Oh, yes.
And they're still supporting him.
Yes, yes, very much so. So much so that his dad helped him remove the car after he came and dragged me in the street. I had a protection order. He wasn't supposed to be at the house. He got into an altercation with my son. He came to the house. I tried mediation because I thought he'd be reasonable. Instead, he'd come to the house and scream expletives in front of the kids. He had contacted everybody in my life and my family to tell them that I was sleeping around. He contacted every ex-boyfriend I ever had prior to him to find out if I'd slept with any of them. It was just complete craziness. I was getting messages from everybody saying, what is happening? But it also made me sit down and think about the people that just left our lives. And I had no explanation for it. And I started following up. And I heard stories that I otherwise would have never known. And one of his ex-girlfriends told me he was visiting at our house during our marriage. There were so many things that were just coming out one after the next. Even to this day, there's still things that I find out.
You're divorced now?
Yes, thank God. I did that very quickly.
But you're still having problems with custody. What's happening with that?
So, because the divorce, what happened was he cut me off financially. So we didn't have any food with the kids. People were helping. But I wanted to get out of that marriage as soon as possible. The mistake I made was foregoing every possible thing. Mind you, at that point, I was working in the business full time already, from 2016 until 2021. It wasn't a good idea to say, I just want to be out of his life. So they only granted me 3,000 rand maintenance for the kids. And I thought, you know what, I don't care, I'm going to figure it out. I've done this before, I've won awards, I can. I was very naive because I was so broken that I couldn't focus on rebuilding. And because 3,000 maintenance that we were fighting even just to get wasn't going to cover what I needed for the kids. So I was trying to figure out how I'm going to feed us. I was selling furniture, sold almost everything in the house just to keep us fed and keep the lights on, while he was still in private abusing me, right? So eventually, what happened, that first year, I had the children in my custody. So he doesn't have custody of the children. We have joint custody of the children, but they're supposed to be living with me. But because we got to the end of 2021 and he insisted the house needed to be sold, I had nowhere to go. It was either I go to the street with the kids, or I drop them off at his mom's house, and I figure myself out. The children had already suffered that year so much. My eldest wasn't eating to try and feed the other kids. It was so stressful, I couldn't put them through that again. So I thought the best thing I could do is, they are strong enough to handle how he is, and they've proved that now. So for me, it's better they are housed and fed for now, so that I can get back to a place where it's healthy and safe and I have the finances to take care of them, and I can bring them back to me. Obviously, them being in his quote-unquote care means that I have to ask permission to get access to my children, even though it's not legally, he doesn't have custody of them. And coincidentally, this weekend, I decided I'm not going to do that anymore. Because I found my children in the care of someone on Saturday that was not someone I've never met, who is supposed to be their new stepmother, who didn't even know who I was, and I wasn't even allowed to see them.
So tell me, how old are the children now?
My eldest is 17, he's going to turn 18 now, 14, 12 and 10.
So tell me, what is their relationship with their father? Do you think they see what he is?
They do, very clearly. And they have the language to put to it, which is wonderful. My eldest son obviously knew early on. But
he was the person,
yes,
the one that was abused.
But he's having the most issues with identity.
Absolutely.
So I'm really having to teach him to be grounded, because he's becoming a man now. And he has all of these opportunities in front of him. So we're just trying to get him to focus on that. My daughter, she is the one who's become a little bit more avoidant. I'm not sure how long it's going to take for her to come around, but I'm letting her figure it out. She just turned 14, so I mean...
Also a difficult age.
Exactly. So me and I have a really good relationship. The two youngest are just like, he's hardly here. What do you want to tell us? What must we tell you?
But he's staying with his parents?
With his mom.
Mom. Okay.
Yeah, his mom and his sister and the sister's kids.
But you don't have a fantastic relationship with them?
No, they harass me, call me out on my name quite often.
Okay. So what have you done to help yourself and others?
So I feel like I found my calling, funny enough. The biggest thing I felt like was that in South Africa we don't understand abusive character traits. What we do is try and rescue people. But what are we doing after they rescue so they don't get into these situations again? Because statistically, a woman from abuse is going to get into another abusive relationship, right? But then also, what are we doing with our teenagers and young ladies to teach them what to look out for and what they need to heal so they aren't attracted to these abusive men? It's a very big gap. So I thought, okay, because I've been in media for a long time, I understand how social media works to a degree, that shooting content and teaching people about abuse is the best way to go about it.
Information.
Yeah, just teaching them But I also speak one-on-one to people. So people come to me for coaching, what they need to heal, what they need to work on. And what's been interesting is that I have more men coming to me lately, because it's so interesting how many of these men are only realizing when you tell them about narcissism specifically that they were also in these relationships.
Absolutely.
You know, so that has been my core driver, especially like in the last month I made a full switch to it. And I'm seeing how important this work is, not only for my still healing journey, but how it helps people recognize that they've sold their soul for someone that was never going to give them what they needed.
And obviously, do you think this is helping your healing process by helping other people?
Oh, definitely.
Because you realize you actually break down what went wrong in your life.
Yes. And I mean, I did most of that work before, but it's the after process. The after you've healed and you now, abusive people avoid me like the plague, which is wonderful.
Because you have that
Exactly.
something.
Exactly. I'm just like, I see you.
Yeah.
But what I'm learning now is defining who I was meant to become before this. And I was just telling someone that I ran into this morning he was my first boyfriend in high school, that if I had even known that this version of me could exist, I would have chosen her first. So it's really shown me that.
But maybe you had to walk this journey to
probably
get where you are now.
Yes, probably.
It probably made you a lot stronger.
It definitely did. I mean, we spoke earlier about like getting arrested and being in jail over Christmas weekend. I grew up in a semi-privileged sort of life, right? I went to private school, whatever. You never think that two things will happen to you, that you'll end up in jail and that you'll end up homeless. Both happened to me. That will wake you up quick, fast, in a hurry, right? And it's the funny thing about that is I believe very strongly in God. There's things that happened in those moments that made me realize I would not be me today if those things didn't happen. Even though those things felt like hell, right? Getting arrested with no reason.
Why did you get arrested? What was the reasoning
It was so funny. Yes. I had 2 domestic violence cases against him, one for dragging me in the street and one for hitting my son. He got arrested twice. I didn't know this. The cops don't inform you. I found out from someone else the day before I got arrested that he was in jail. I was like, oh, okay. I don't know what to say because the cops don't inform me. Friday was Christmas Eve. Was it Friday or Thursday? Friday was Christmas Eve. I didn't have money for food. So I sent the kids to my mom for the weekend and I thought I'll spend Christmas by myself. I don't need to eat, I'm okay. He pulled up at the yard with the cops. They took me to the police station and then proceeded to arrest me for a cell phone they said I broke, which was his. Now mind you, during the incident where I was dragged during the street, now I'll tell you how much more ridiculous it gets. It gets worse. So the day he dragged me in the street, he broke my phone and he hurt my daughter. So this day, he tells them, I broke his cell phone, so I need to be arrested for that, right? But his cell phone was broken. I was in the East Rand when it happened. And there's evidence, because the car I had a tracker in. And when I was in the East Rand, it was during lockdown time, the cop called me and said, your husband just came to the police station. He said he's going to the house because he says you were not there, because he was tracking my movements, and you left your children alone. I don't know what to tell you. It's lockdown. It's not safe for you to drive from the East Rand here, but I'm worried about him going there with your children, and there's a protection order against him. I didn't have a choice. I got in the car and I sped through. By the time I got there, he'd already left my son and thrown him out. But my son threw him and his phone because he walked in recording my son in the front door. So that was what I got arrested for. And because it was under domestic violence, he knew, because his family are cops, and I found out after he left, he's got a lot of cop friends that he's been working with. Yeah. That's wild to me still to this day. That I was going to be locked up for the entire Christmas weekend.
So that's what they do, is they like to do it on a Thursday or a Friday, especially in a long weekend, because there's no magistrate to see.
Exactly.
So you were...
Yeah, I was in a cell. It was very interesting.
At least you had something to eat. I'm sorry.
Well, it was brown bread and the coffee was gross. But at least I had food. And I showered just before I went in. It's like, I was like, shower nicely. And I just started watching Netflix. I was using my friend's Netflix account. And then I spent the weekend in jail. Luckily, I showered because can you imagine? Yeah. I would have been horrible.
Absolutely.
But the interesting thing about that experience was there was a woman locked up there with me who had no business being there. She had a fight with her daughter, took spice in the shop and put it in her breast by accident. And because she was tipsy, they never really helped out and found out what was going on. So she got arrested and couldn't get hold of her daughter because she doesn't have a cell phone. She shouldn't have stayed there with me all 4 nights, but she did.
There is not real justice out there in our justice system, unfortunately, and I do deal with that on a regular basis.
The thing about it was, the reason...
So did they not continue with prosecution at all?
No, so I was released on the Tuesday.
From Thursday to the Tuesday,
Yeah,
wow.
I was released on the Tuesday. I had to have someone fetch money that I had left for my bail. My uncles came with my mom. My uncles came with my mom to get me out. And then in February, just before the divorce, my family insisted we go to the court to drop all of the cases. That was a very wild event. But I felt like I needed to drop it because I wanted to stop giving him attention. Because it doesn't matter what attention you give them. Even negative attention.
It's good attention.
Exactly.
Okay.
So yeah, and then it was interesting.
And then you ended up homeless at a stage as well.
Oh my word.
Incident that you say is really bad.
Yeah, that was scary. So after the house was sold, the only thing I could do was take the 2,000 rand I had left, 2 suitcases, get on a bus and go to Cape Town. I have family in Cape Town who I had a relatively close relationship with prior to this. But I had no idea that it was not going to necessarily be a welcome situation, so I couldn't go there. On the bus, I had to figure out where I was going to stay. So I booked a backpackers. I'd never stayed in a backpackers before. Like I said, we were semi-privileged before, so this was a new experience. And I hustled every day just to make sure I could pay that backpackers and try and find food. I was sometimes successful, sometimes not. I was in fight or flight mode all of the time. I got my gear from the funding in between all of that, but I couldn't use it because I had no relationships work-wise in Cape Town. It was just a disaster. And by June, I ran out of options because it's winter, there's no work in winter in Cape Town, and had to go to the homeless shelter. That was the scariest thing I could have ever done because, you know, when you haven't been there, all that you have in your mind is what they show you on TV, that you probably die. So, you know, just, it's really dangerous. I went there and then I wasn't there long and a friend rescued me and then I stayed at her place. But what was interesting was I was terrified. I slept with my phone in my bra because robberies are very high. I couldn't go with any of my stuff there. So every morning I get up really early. I couldn't shower there because there's no hot water. Their food is really good though. That was the best food I actually had since all of this started. Like I remember putting on Instagram, guys, I have sweet corn. I don't even remember what sweet corn tastes like. Like, the poverty was that bad. So, but what was interesting is that experience actually made me realize how these people have actually gotten there. And the same shelter I do talks at now.
Because it's, you don't think it's you, but it's ordinary people that sometimes end up in really extraordinary bad situations. How did you start that process to get out of it?
I think what is in my favor is that I'm always like trying to find a way out of everything. Like I cannot sit on my hands. That it would drive me crazy. Yeah. So I said to the lady when I met the counselor, I said to her, I'm just telling you, this is not a permanent situation, this is temporary. I know how I got here. I don't know how I'm going to get out yet, but I will. I'll figure it out. I figured out everything to this point, so it will happen. So I had a plan. The funny thing is the plan I had at the time, I'm not doing. It's not what's making me do what I'm doing right now. But I understood that if I decided to resign myself to the fact that this is what my life is going to look like. Look, you have a bed, you have food, you have shelter, you don't have to actually worry about anything. But if I want to leave a legacy for my children through this and not have abuse be a part of their lives in the same way that it's been in mine, I have to do something. So that was literally the consensus when I went in there. And everyone I had a conversation with for the first 2 days that I was there, I was saying the same thing to her. I was like, so what is your plan when you leave here? And then they're shocked because they're like, I wasn't planning to leave. I'm like, well, you need another plan.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So tell me, how did you, in between all of this chaos, wrote the book, and what's the book about? It's called Witness Me.
Yes.
And it looks like these, I see as a warrior shield maiden. So obviously you're a warrior woman, and that's really important from the Girls on Fire perspective. How did you write this book, and what's the book about?
So right after he left and I was being harassed and stalked and I thought I was going to die at one point because we found bullets in his cupboard and the cops were asking me if he had a gun. Because I had no support system, the only thing I could do was write. And I have a friend who publishes books, and for years he's been asking me to write a book. But he said to me one day, his wife told me yesterday that she told him this, but he said to me, your story is not meant for you. But sometimes you need to write just for you. So that's what I did. It was therapy. I couldn't be hysterical in front of my children, not realizing what was going on in my life. I wrote like a crazy woman for those first 3 months. And then every time I was in distress, I mean, obviously my nervous system is crazy unstable throughout this entire period. So when I really had no control over anything, I'd write. Before I knew it, I was 70,000 words in.
Wow.
And I was just like, okay, we might have something here, right?
Book.
Yeah. But I held on to it because the book is very vulnerable.
And personal.
And it goes to areas that as South Africans we don't want to talk about. Like things like sexual abuse in marriage, right? We don't want to discuss that because we think it's a taboo topic. I go there. I had to really just expose all of it for myself, and when I went through it, I was like, I have met people who've been through similar situations, but I have no idea how to recognize any of it. This book may be valuable. So I sent it to both my mentors. The one came back and said, I cannot believe what happened.
Yeah.
So essentially, I tried to finish most of it in December. I'm now just editing the last pieces before I do the pre-sale and just organizing it. But every time I read it, I'm reminded, and this is where the warrior thing comes from, that some of that stuff I shouldn't have survived. If anything, I should have committed suicide. Because between the depression, the hospitalization, the confusion, the abuse, the thinking I was crazy all of the time, there are moments, especially my last pregnancy, I don't know even how I managed to get out of bed. And then the last 2 years as well. So that's where the book came from. And from the time I had the vision of the book, the picture that came to mind was the warrior in the fire, who walks through the fire. And my reference point is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the Bible that were in the fiery furnace, and then they had Jesus stand with them there. And it made me realize I'd walked through that fire. You can't walk around it.
No.
So, but I came out on the other side. And it's funny, the person I saw this morning confirmed to me. He said, you are such a brighter version of who I knew you throughout your whole marriage. And I said, because I found her. I found the strength that was subdued throughout all of this. Because I was doing it because I wanted someone to want me. I don't need anybody to want me now except me. So.
Fantastic. So if you have a message out there for other ladies, so we've changed 16 days of activism to 16 days of action. Because talking about it
is one thing
and it doesn't mean anything. You need to take action, and that's why we've changed it to action. What would your message be to other women out there that's in similar situation than you are?
Mine is probably going to sound counterproductive to what culture is teaching right now. You can try and leave. In South Africa, you might end up dying before you do that, right? Because they become more violent when you want to leave. Heal. Do your own personal healing even while you're there. Because when you do leave, it will be easier to stay out of it. But then the other thing that they don't tell people to do is plan. You never exit without a strategy. If you don't have a financial plan, you will end up like I did. If you don't understand how the court system works, because it's different everywhere in the country, you will be trapped in it, and it will further traumatize you, right? You heal to the point where you are also not, I'm messy, so you're not messy over everyone. You're not dumping your stuff on everyone, because you can't trust everybody when this happens. Most of those people already have a different version of the story than you're telling them, so you look like a crazy person. So your planning is important, and then a support system. You need to have a support system where you are taking all of your evidence. You're storing it in a safe place, but you have someone you can send it to, that you've communicated to, that is not in contact with your abuser. Because the only way to get up, I promise you, is support. If I didn't find the level of support I've never experienced in my life, the way that I have now in Cape Town, I would still be in the shelter.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much for talking to me. And we wish you a fantastic
Thank you.
path ahead. I'm sure you're going to be ahead of everything that you've ever planned.
I hope so for my kids' sake.
Absolutely, you will be. You've got it in you.
Yeah.
You're a warrior. Thank you very
you.
much for speaking.
Every woman, I have taken up arms and I choose to defend all that I hold dear. Independent and strong, you will not keep me down. You can't break me. I'm a girl on fire. I'm not a victim. A girl on fire. I'll stand my ground. Girl on fire. I've made a choice. I stand proud. I'm a girl on fire. Countless hours on the range, I am responsibly armed. I am your equal. I've empowered myself. I have practiced and trained. Fear won't control me. With my sisters in arms, we will make ourselves heard. We'll stand together. I'm a girl